everybody! Pink Unicorn! Welcome to the Japanese Whisky Lockdown! What an exciting time! The US Navy releases UFO videos and everyone is like, who cares? When can I go to the park again? What a time to be alive! If the UFOs had come to the earth to look for the best whiskey, I would have advised them to use time warp function and go back to 1993 to get a bottle of Karuizawa and then return it to me. Because last Sunday was my birthday! Yes! Happy birthday, Pink Unicorn! Ooh-wee! Yeah, my horn is still growing. Well, I used to not care about my age at all. I was like, you girl, age is nothing but number. But Japanese whiskey and Beyonce have taught me that age is the value. At age of 50, I will be worth $400,000 like Karuizawa. So, everyone, big news in the world of Pink Unicorn. I was on a TV show with Paul Hollywood in UK. Yay! Yes, it was one of my biggest dreams. It was great honor for me to be written up like this in The Guardian. Paul Hollywood and the show were amazing. The Guardian said, if only Kirara had been lead presenter on the whole show. Well, guess what? If I was, it would be so fun. And it would be all about Japanese whiskey. And you'll be watching it right now. Ladies and gentlemen, we are so happy to have with us this guy. He's been writing about whiskey and the other spirits for many years and has written for and edited many spirits and whiskey magazines. He's the author of many books on whiskey, including one on Japanese whiskey. He now runs the Wizards of Whiskey Hours. So please welcome Dominic Roskrow!
Hello, hi.
Well, thank you very much for joining. Now, during lockdown, what are you drinking?
Well, I'm not drinking very much Japanese whiskey at the moment because I don't have any. Many years ago, we used to get big bottles of everything, but now we get little tiny sample bottles.
If you had any Japanese bottles or Japanese whiskey bottles now, what would you choose?
I absolutely love Yamazaki 18-year-old. I used to work at the whiskey shop many years ago, and we had 4 bottles of it at £75 each. And one day a man came in and he bought all 4 bottles. And that's when the pricing started, and Japanese whiskey became a Yamazaki 18-year-old is very expensive now, so I don't see it very often, if at all. Japanese whiskey became a huge success story at the start of the millennium. And then it started to win awards, and Japan hadn't laid down lots of old 18-year-old, 25-year-old whiskey, and it simply ran out. You know, the demand worldwide was huge, the supply was limited, and we're still waiting now for it to come around again. But it was the success story, the first decade of the millennium, and the price went up accordingly, so that was that.
So how did you become interested in Japanese whiskey?
I was a latecomer to the category. I became editor of Whiskey magazine, and then I launched my own awards, and both Nikka and Suntory entered all their whiskies, and suddenly I was presented with bottle after bottle of just amazing whiskey. We have a far greater understanding now, or enjoyment of Japanese culture, and I think the combination of fantastic whiskey, fantastic food, and a fantastic culture have made the whole idea of Japan and its people very attractive to us. So whiskey is part of that.
I see. What was the best part about writing a book about Japanese whiskey?
when I was asked to do it, I was aware that there were people who knew more about Japanese whiskey than I do. But there are two ways you can write a book. You can write a book as an expert, and you say, I'm an expert and I'm telling you. Or you can do it as a journalist and say, I'm not an expert, but I can go and talk to the people who are. And so that's what I did in this book. I basically took a subject and asked the question, how did it go from nowhere to everywhere, from zero to hero? So my book is more a sort of a Lonely Planet guides, beginner's guide, if you like, of what Japanese whiskey is, where it comes from, where it got to. So I kind of, if you like, traveled on their journey. But to write the book and take it from beginning right up to date was a truly great experience. It's the nearest thing I've got to doing a journalistic version of a book. And I think it's really important that that people find an entry level and go on their own journey and are encouraged to do so. It's an obvious subject. It's a whole culture to discover, so that's great.
Wow, interesting, fantastic.
It's an interesting time for Japanese whiskey because there is the debate going on about whether to have rules and define what whiskey is. And the plus side of that is that you make sure that people know that Japanese whiskey is made in Japan and it's made to a certain standard. The downside of that is that you shouldn't stop innovation and the ability to try new things.
So could you tell us about Wizards of Whiskey Awards a little bit?
So obviously there are a lot of awards now, and I've been involved as a judge with some fabulous awards, but what I set out to do, I thought it would be good to talk about new countries that had never really been to the attention of whiskey fans, and everything from Australia to Spain to Taiwan to up into Sweden. And my timing, when I went freelance, the first distilleries like Mackmyra in Sweden and Lark and the Sullivan's Cove in Australia were just at their kind of start. Since then, this whole area of New World whiskies exploded, but this was my specialist area. And so I wanted to reflect that because I felt that people wouldn't, it was just like it was with Japanese whiskey originally. It takes a lot for people to take it seriously. My awards are now relatively small, but I still love, nothing excites me more than finding a new craft distiller or a micro distiller who's trying to do something new. That's what my wizards are about, really. They're just about reflecting and celebrating some people who can't perhaps afford early days to go into the bigger awards, maybe.
How do you think Japanese industries will be changing in near future?
So Japan has sort of disappeared a little bit, and it's a case of how it comes back. And the other thing is, it's no longer really acceptable. I think most people would agree that mixing spirit from overseas and then putting it in a cask in Tokyo doesn't make it a Japanese whiskey. And adding Scotch whiskey to Japanese whiskey to make Japanese blended whiskey, it goes against the whole whiskey provenance thing. The rules may well be less strict than the Scotch Whisky Association, so that unusual ways of maturing spirit can still be used in Japanese whiskey, and I think that's important too. So I think it's a combination of coming back into the market at a price point where people can afford, and being allowed to continue with the excellence and the innovation that Japan has shown over the years.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Sante.
Olympics have been postponed in my home country of Japan. But while we wait for the real sports to return, Whisky Lockdown is here to guide you through some new Olympic sports you can play in the comfort of your home. Toilet paper bowling. Set up a pyramid of toilet paper on the floor. Then take your favorite frozen meal and slide it at the toilet paper. Extra points if you eat a frozen meal later that day. Oh, you can also play this with your favorite cup noodle. The dry bathroom. It's time for the big three. Head to the bathroom and lock the door until you take hot bath, hot shower, and steam. Can you handle the heat? Can you? Whiskey pong! Similar to the well-known drinking game of beer pong, just replace beer for your favorite whiskey. When your opponent sinks a bottle in your cup, you drink. Then the first one sinks their opponent's cups wins. Well, whether you win or lose, you always win. Or, in my case, fall asleep. Now I'm super excited to have this guest tonight. He is an amazing singer-songwriter from America, and he was the top finalist of an American Idol, and also the nephew of that Carlos Santana. So please welcome Adam Lasher.
Hello, hola.
Hi, Adam. Hola.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing happy. It's starting to get really hot. It's like summer already.
Your American Idol was really amazing, but how was it for you?
By the time Idol came around, I was happy and I was having fun, and I wasn't afraid of being like, oh my, like, what if they don't like me? It was just like, this is me, I'm gonna have fun, and if you don't want me, just like let me go and I'll do my own thing. And because I had that relaxed attitude, for some reason, maybe they just liked me and had me on 2 seasons, I don't know. So when I auditioned, I was getting back from a tour in St. Bart's, which is this little like French island. At the time, I broke my hand skateboarding, and then I had long hair, so I had like a headband on, and then I at the airport, because I had one hand, I dropped my guitar and it broke. So I had like a broken guitar, a broken hand, I had like a headband, so I guess when I went on the show, they thought, Jennifer Lopez, I guess, thought I was Jimmy Fallon, but like in a costume, trying to play a prank on them, because I just had like a beard and long hair and a bandana. It was just like a lot going on. Yeah, she thought I was Jimmy Fallon, and like for a second I was like, yeah, I'm Jimmy Fallon, and I was like, no, I'm not. What are you talking about? So after my audition, she thought it was funny, and she actually like texted Jimmy Fallon just like on her own phone, and she's like, oh my god, like Jimmy, like this kid looks like you. And I didn't think anything of it. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like I exist for a second to Jimmy Fallon. And then they didn't even tell me, and I guess they played this episode where Ryan Seacrest went on Jimmy Fallon to promote the show, and Jimmy Fallon dresses up as people sometimes. Mm-hmm. So he put on a fake beard, he put on a mustache, he put on a wig, and he dressed up as me, and he impersonated me for like a second or like whatever.
So all right, so you like Japanese whiskey too?
How did you know? Yes, I do.
Everybody watching this show should be drinking whiskey while they are watching this show. So can you play something which is good for drinking whiskey time?
I've looked for love in all the same old places. The bottom of a bottle was always dry. When you breathed inside your hand, I didn't waste it, 'cause I was already here. Too far gone. You're as smooth as Japanese whiskey. You're as sweet as a strawberry wine. You're as warm as a glass of brandy. And I'll stay strong on your love all the time. You're as smooth as Tennessee whiskey, Japanese whiskey. You're sweet as strawberry wine.
All right. My own version. Yes. If I had a shot, I would take it right now.
Wow, so cool, fantastic. I
Thank you.
love
That
it.
song's that original song's called Tennessee Whiskey. Today, it's called Japanese Whiskey.
Japanese whiskey.
Maybe the audience really want to know more about you. So, where can we find you?
Just type in Adam Lasher on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and you'll be able to find me. Spotify, you can hear my music. I have a brand new album that's going to be out, and look out for a new show called Musicology. It's going to most likely, I think it's going to go to PBS in California, and it's a show where I get to act silly and interview musicians and whatnot. And yeah, guys, don't forget to drink your whiskey too. It's good for you. But thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was great. Amazing music. どうもありがとうございます。
Animal Crossing! No, not that video game! Using a laser pointer and see how many times you can get your cat across the living room in an hour. Extra points if your cat uses hurdles. Decathlon! Find 10 pillows in your home. Then take a nap on each of them. Whichever pillow you can take the longest nap is the winner. Oh, make sure to buy gold, silver, and bronze pillowcases beforehand. Quarantine marathon. Make sure to stretch well before this exhausting test of endurance. Here's how it works. Put on your most comfortable sweatpants and lay on your couch. Then have a Netflix marathon. Well, I currently hold a marathon record of 3 days and 20 hours. Speed eating. Nothing fancy here. Pick a food, set a timer to 10 minutes, and shove as much of it into your belly until you are so sick you won't even think about going outside again. I'm getting really good at this. Handball! Did I say handball? I meant highball. Treat yourself to a glass of whiskey between your grueling athletic competition. You earned it. Alright guys, tonight we're so pleased to have with us this amazing guy from Tokyo. He is a specialist of Japanese sword. Okay, let me introduce him, Mr. Paul Martin. Yay! Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa.
So, what What triggered you get into Japanese sword?
When I was young, my father practiced karate. So I grew up from about the age of 7 until I was around 30 practicing karate. But then but I always wanted to start kendo. But then I went on to iaido with a live blade. And so nowadays I mostly practice iaido. Use a real sword. We practice forms with the real sword.
Is it easy to get real Japanese sword in Japan?
Yeah, I mean, there's like 5 or 6 sword shops in Ginza alone. Yeah, so, and anyone can own a sword. So every swordsmith since the Second World War has to be licensed. And then every sword has to be licensed individually. This license has all the sword's details written on it, and it has to be with the sword all the time. The complex thing about swords is that they're both art while being a weapon, fundamentally a weapon. So they have to be licensed, you know.
What is the background history of Japanese swords?
Sword making began to take off in Japan between the 3rd and 6th centuries. And then as it developed, the original shapes were straight swords like the ones on the Asian continent, but then by the mid-10th century, the Japanese put the curve into the sword and made it uniquely Japanese. You know, the curve of the sword in combination with the natural arc of your arms when you swing can, you know, this is a better cut and slices more easily. The sword has been a symbol of the samurai and a symbol of a status symbol within the hierarchy of Japan.
All samurais recognize Japanese sword as art in some perspective.
Yeah. There's old collections of drawings of swords and descriptions of swords. So, you know, they all the descriptions, the makers' names and these things. You can pretty much study anything to do with Japanese culture, and at some point it will cross over with swords. I think that swords, because swords are not just weapons, they're art, but they're also spiritual items. You know, the owners or the makers would imbue the spirits of the kami into the blade with in it, and even the origin myths of Japan. You know, the Yamato no Orochi tale and things like this. This all comes back to Japanese swords. Now that tale where Susanoo slays the Yamato no Orochi, you find the sword in the tail of the dragon, or the serpent dragon, and he gives that sword to his sister in repentance for his bad deeds, and that sword becomes the sword of the imperial regalia. Now, this means that Japanese mythical history and real history are inextricable, because that sword was allegedly in a box when the most recent Reiwa emperor became emperor, you know, for the ceremonies. Yeah. So it's incredible stuff.
How often you need to polish or?
You only really want to polish a sword about as little as possible. For example, this sword is 600 years old. And
600 years old. Wow, so shiny. Wow.
So really, I shouldn't speak over the blade, because if a little bit of spittle comes out of my mouth and lands on the blade, it could leave a little rust ring, and then it has to be polished to repair it. There's always been a certain amount of refined polishing so that people could recall the pattern of the hamon, the pattern of the hardened edge. This one is straight, and the pattern of the grain steel. And then there's a wood grain pattern in the steel. And also, the shape of the blade is different for every period. So the curvature changes, you know, not just the curvature, the geometry as well, but the shape of the blade changes for every period, so that when you look at the sword and you look at the shape, you can tell which period it was made in. And then when you look at the grain pattern of the steel and the hues and textures of the steel, you can tell where in Japan it was made. And then when you look at the hamon, that's kind of like the way that the swordsmith applied the clay to make the hamon before he quenched the blade. That's kind of like handwriting. So like I said, you look at the shape, tells you when. Look at the grain pattern, the hues and textures tells you where. And then when you look at the actual hamon itself, the pattern of the hamon can tell you who made the blade. That sword, like I said, that sword was 600 years old. So the sword that I use is 40 years old. But you know, this is what I call a working blade, because I actually use it for iaido. Now, but if you look at the blade, it's not too dissimilar from the one made 600 years ago. The actual fundamental construction of Japanese swords was perfected around the mid-10th century. And it has, you know, apart from various changes in slight changes in manufacture or changes in shape, the fundamental, you know, manufacture method hasn't changed. And like I said, you can make a much more effective Japanese-shaped sword out of modern steel but it won't have all the artistic qualities, the wood grain pattern and the hamon, the pattern of the hardened edge and things like this in it. The things that Japanese people love. So I find it kind of amazing. I think this is all part of the spirituality and there's religious aspects to it as well, Shinto and Buddhism and Confucianism and all these things tied into the sword. And it's not just merely a weapon. It's a much, much greater thing than that,
Is there any place where international people can see great Japanese swords?
The Osafuni Sword Museum in Setouchi in Okayama just purchased the Yamatorige National Treasure sword, which is a very, very flamboyant sword from the Kamakura period. So, now that it's in a museum, anyone from around the world can go to the Osafuni Sword Museum, and when it's on display, they'll be able to see it, rather than if it was in a private collection and only the owner could see it.
Is there any Japanese spiritual thoughts influencing your real life?
I think that the Japanese are masters of recognizing impermanence. So like the cherry blossom viewing, would the cherry blossom be as beautiful if it didn't fall? This kind of thought train, watching time pass and acknowledging, the impermanence of everything. These things are, when I say them, they give me goosebumps because they're such profound things to hear,
So I think some people who are watching this show might get interested in having a Japanese sword. So how do they get Japanese swords made for themselves?
Most swordsmiths speak Japanese, so you need an agent like me, But if they were to contact me and they wanted to order a sword, I can place the order for them with a swordsmith, or I can make recommendations based on their budget and things like this for different swordsmiths. Because you can go from $10,000 up to $50,000. But the art that you can use if you wanted to, but that you probably wouldn't. I have an FAQ on my website for anyone who wants to buy swords or is thinking about buying a sword. There's an FAQ on my website, and they can just read through that.
So, what is your website? Where should we go?
My website is www.thejapanesesword.com.
So, Paul-san, どうもありがとうございました. Thank you very much for joining us. That was quite interesting and informative conversation about the Japanese swords. Okay, so thank you very much. ありがとうございます. Stay safe. Thank you very much for tuning into Japanese Whisky Lockdown. I believe you enjoyed it. I know you are already drunk, but yeah, just stick with me a little bit more. So in Japan, it's the middle of Golden Week, which is a holiday week until May 6th. Nothing special this year. We're gonna stay home and we gotta watch Tiger King, maybe Terrace House. But our mind is free. Your mind can go anywhere. So by drinking Japanese whiskey, enjoy the trip to Japan. I'm waiting for you. Alright guys, so don't forget to subscribe to Dekanta YouTube channel and follow us on the social medias. And of course, please don't forget to follow my social medias by Kirara Comedy. So guys, kanpai!